The big question is, will this work? Have I done enough?
Marathon training maybe isn't all that sustainable, which seems kind of at odds with Norwegian singles. So, what do? We're getting there. Today, I want to talk about the Norwegian Singles Approach and how I've been adapting that for marathon training. For context, today is April 17th, so I'm a little over 2 weeks from my marathon on May 3rd, where the goal is to go sub 3 hours. First off, some caveats. This is not prescriptive. I'm not telling you how to do this. This is not even how I would do it next time. All I'm doing, for the sake of capturing this journey, is recording what the plan has been so far, warts and all. It's very easy to start analyzing things, but we're not there yet. This is not a post-mortem. However, no plan survives contact with the enemy, so I will be going over some of the adaptations that I've been making along the way. As I go over all of this, you may be thinking, you idiot. All of this is so obvious. Of course it happened this way. But I want you to keep two things in mind. One, you're thinking that with the benefit of hindsight. It's very easy to look at a plan after the fact and see all the problems with it. And two, yeah, I know. The story begins back in November with the Norwegian Singles Approach. This was the base building phase, and it was super vanilla Norwegian singles. We're talking 3 sub-threshold sessions a week, the rest easy runs with a long run on the weekend. A spring marathon means winter training. In years past, I have run outside in all conditions, and I mean, it works. You just need the right layers, but it does mean a lot of slogs. We're talking slow paces, bad form, and even though you're going slowly, honestly, it's not easy efforts. I wanted my sub-threshold sessions to have some real speed in them, so I turned to the treadmill. A lot. Like 800 kilometers on the treadmill since January. A lot. On the treadmill, my recorded data is basically useless. You can calibrate Garmin after each run, but it's just for the entire distance. So it doesn't really have any concept of what paces your individual intervals were actually run at. Every workout is just execution score of 0 for me. Instead, I calculated the distance of each of those intervals based on the speed of the treadmill and the duration of the interval. But this isn't great either, because the treadmill itself is not calibrated, so 7.6 miles per hour on the screen might not translate to that actual speed. At this point, we're using heart rate as a proxy for lactate levels, which we're using as a guide to get that fuzzy LT2 threshold to be pushed up from below. It's getting to be a bit hand-wavy, but I think it's important to recognize that having really precise measurements wouldn't be a panacea here. Even if I could really precisely determine my lactate threshold to be 176 BPM or correlated with that, and I could keep my heart rate below 175 and I could run exactly 406 minute per kilometer pace for 3 minutes, that still might not be the optimal stimulus for my body on that given day. The point I'm trying to make is that the whole principle of the Norwegian Singles Approach is to put in as much work as you can without passing over that lactate threshold into runaway lactate accumulation, which would correspond with increased recovery needs and thus an inability to put in as much work overall. That's the whole principle. That's all we're really trying to do. The numbers are in service of that. Could better numbers help me get there more efficiently? Yeah, maybe. One thing I'd really love to do is get a treadmill sensor where it measures a marker going around the belt and gives you a true pace and then broadcasts that over Bluetooth to your watch. That would let me use sites like Runalyze or intervals.icu and actually measure my cumulative training load, stuff like that. So I'd love to do that next year. Instead, my focus was pretty simple. Do intervals on the treadmill at speeds that would keep my heart rate below what I estimated my lactate threshold to be. And this worked great. I fit in way more speed work than I normally would across winter training, so I'm super happy with that. I'm also incorporating strength training twice a week. First day is core work, second day is lifting. Along with that, I'm incorporating some really sort of basic introductory plyometrics. I think I have a lot of potential to add more stuff there, but for this block, I kept it very simple. The goal, though, has always been the marathon, and that has some pretty particular demands. In fact, marathon training maybe isn't all that sustainable, which seems kind of at odds with Norwegian singles. So, what do we do? First off, I looked for some other inspirations. James Copeland does have a marathon plan in his book, outlines what he did, but he makes it very clear that this is not a standalone plan. And in particular, it's not something you should be attempting if you only have a few months of base building under your belt. James is also a lot faster than me, so looking at the plan, I would immediately have to modify it. In particular, he gets his long runs up to about 2 hours and 20 minutes, 2:25, because that matches what he intends to race. For me, I would already need to change that to 3 hours. He also gets up to things like 5 by 5K at subthreshold pace, which, yes, I could change to be time-based, but then it doesn't represent as big a chunk of the marathon as I need to be running. Basically, with the warning up front and all of the modifications that would be required, I just didn't think this was the plan for me. It didn't make sense for me to just lift this wholesale and attempt it myself. I also looked into how some other YouTubers had talked about adapting the plan. A serious hobby jogger shared his plan and his rationale for the modifications he made, which is fantastic and a big reason why I'm sharing mine here. I also found this one a bit hard to relate to. His paces are, again, much faster than mine, but he also makes good use of double run days on his easy days, and that just didn't fit into my schedule. So we all work within our constraints. This one wasn't quite a match for me either. I ended up settling on this approach. Number 1. Increase the duration of the easy runs just to get that overall run volume up. Number 2, slightly increase the duration of the subthreshold sessions. And I'm talking taking things from like a 4 by 6 minutes, eventually to a 5 by 6 minutes, and then maybe a 5 by 7 minutes. I wasn't trying to make these sessions really crazy, but I did want them to still represent, a respectable percentage of my overall running volume. The third thing was to increase the long runs. For my own confidence and sanity, I felt I needed to get my long runs up to that 30, 32, even 34 kilometers just to build that endurance into my legs, to build that confidence into my legs, to build that confidence into me. I felt I needed big long runs as a healthy part of the marathon block. Now, as part of that, I knew that as these long runs got more and more intense, I would have to drop one of these subthreshold sessions. I couldn't do 3 workouts, even if they are subthreshold, plus a massive long run. That's just too much in a week. So that is the overall big picture. How did it play out? In January, my run club resumed their workouts, and this, I felt, should just take the spot of one of my subthreshold sessions. These workouts are not super formal. There is a prescribed workout for people who are doing marathons, and it might take the form of something like 8 by 1 kilometer with 2 minutes rest. That's a very simple one. They're usually more involved with that, but it would be something like that. And I decided I would just do that workout, but target more subthreshold paces rather than completely rinsing myself trying to make it a VO2 max effort. And I wore my heart rate strap on my arm to try to enable that. Now, conditions in Ottawa in the winter are not that good. We run in a parking lot, which is usually plowed and usually salted, but still, it can be icy. It's really cold. It's windy. These sessions, they went okay. But they're my only form of social running. And to me, that is hugely important. That's worth the trade-off any day of the week. So I make space for it. I make space for it in my schedule, and it takes the place of one subthreshold session. The volume doesn't quite match up with like a neat 4 by 6 minute interval, but it's fine. I think it is usually pretty equivalent. The only exception is when I go too fast. Now, at these things, I should mention, I'm not chasing people. Although it's a run club, we're all sort of doing our own paces, and it ends up being people just doing their workout at the same time in the same place. We're not really running together or pushing the pace together. So it is genuinely a pretty good match for this. At this time, I'm also upping the duration of my easy runs, eventually settling on 90 minutes for the easy runs. Splitting these into 2 runs would have been better, but it just didn't work for me time-wise. My long runs were also gradually increasing in duration, eventually getting to around that 2.5 hour mark. And throughout all of this, I'm still taking a full day of rest every week. Okay, I have an easy run to do today. It is bizarrely like 16, 17 degrees out. Let's finish the rest of this outside. Seamless. Don't forget.
Ah, much better. What a beautiful day. Okay, brought my notes with me so we can still talk about this. So at this point, we've done about 3 months of pretty vanilla NSA training. The difference is we've increased the duration of the easy runs, and the long run is really starting to get up there in terms of length. That brings us to the week of February 23rd. This is where I dropped one of those sub-threshold sessions in favor of the long run. The long run is just getting too long at this point. It's becoming too much of a workout, and it needs to be respected. All right, if you ever want to feel self-conscious making a vlog in the woods, just walk past a high school class out on their walk. Their scathing wit will cut you to the bone. Okay, so as I was saying, the long run has gotten to be too much of a workout for it to exist alongside 3 other workouts. So one of the sub-threshold workouts gets folded in. Moreover, the intent is that some of that pace will be incorporated into the long runs, and that would happen on a bi-weekly basis. So every other week I would do some marathon pace or sub-threshold work in the long run. Yes, and it's around this point that we hit peak volume of 120 kilometers, a new record. Okay, the following week, March 2nd, we make another sacrifice at the altar of volume. This time the rest day is given way to a 5K easy run. If I was analyzing the block at this point, I would say this is peak overconfidence. We hit another volume record, 122 kilometers for the week. Okay, the following week, March 9th, this is when I do one of those long runs with the sub-threshold pace folded in. Now, careful listeners will have heard that I said sub-threshold pace there, not sub-threshold effort. Hold on, I forgot to pause my watch. That's right, I don't know why, but I went in pursuit of sub-threshold pace. This was a day where I was pretty fatigued and it was extremely windy. And with the accumulated volume over the previous 2 weeks, it's too much for me. This is what I would say is the beginning of the hole that I dug for myself. Following week, March 16th, I backed off. This is where it makes sense not to have your plan written in stone. You need to be able to adapt to how you're feeling. And it worked. I felt better immediately. In fact, it worked a little too well, because by the time we reached Thursday of that week, my run club, I was feeling great. So I pushed it too hard, and then I had to back off again. So that ended up being just one sub-threshold session for the week, or I guess one VO2 max session for the week. So failed to stick to the plan there. Okay, March 23rd. Start off the week with a long run with some sub-threshold work mixed in. This time, it goes okay. Do the rest of my sub-threshold workouts that week, they go okay. And at this point, I'm totally fine with okay. We are in the heart of marathon training. Kind of expect things to be getting tough. So okay, totally fine by me. The following week, March 30th, this is when the long run goes awry. It's the one where I feel dizzy, I have to cut it short. By coincidence, I happen to be getting some blood work done later that week. I get that done. Some of the results are outside of normal. Still waiting to hear back on what that means. I have the Bunny Run 10K on the weekend. Feels a lot tougher than I think it should. At this point, the confidence is shot, and I'm beginning to think there could actually be something wrong here. We do the responsible thing. Next week, week of April 6th, pull the emergency brake. 3 full days of rest. Strength training, which I've been doing diligently up until this point, total pause. And this leaves me yo-yoing all over the place. I do my run club, it feels great. I do easy runs, they feel way too hard. But notably, I go for a long run on the weekend, just an easy run, but still, 35K. Feels great. So, it's confusing, to say the least. So now, we're into the taper. For a brief moment, I was actually tempted to go with the Fitzinger Advanced Marathoning Plan taper, because I've done that before, notably last year, and it works so well for me. But I'm going to stay the course, I'm going to be calm, I'm going to adhere to traditional taper principles, which is reduce the volume, but maintain the intensity. So that's what I'm going to do. I am much more focused on arriving at the start line rested and energized. That's my whole focus right now. What's left? Well, we've got one last good session on the weekend. On Sunday, I'll do a long run, probably try to incorporate some marathon pace efforts, and I'd like to wear my race shoes for that too. And then we'll be 2 weeks from race day. So the taper will continue in the following week with a reduction down to, maybe 60K total volume. And then the final week will be dress rehearsal, race logistics, sorting out the fueling and all that stuff, and the carb loading. We're getting there. If you stuck around this long, thank you so much. I really appreciate all your comments. Really like hearing about all of your races. The big question is, will this work? Have I done enough? And, I don't have an answer for you yet because I haven't run the race. You're just gonna have to subscribe, follow along, and find out. But that's a pretty good deal. It's free. Over 350 of you have already done it. Those are rookie numbers. Let's get that up. If we can get to 1,000, I can get monetized. Maybe I can keep doing these videos in another training block. I would love to do that. All of you with spring races coming up, get in the comments. Tell us how your training block has gone, what your goal is, how you're feeling. I think we're all getting ready for our races now. So let's support each other. Good luck out there. All right, that's going to do it for me for this week. See you next week.